All right, guys. Our next guest is a man of many hats. He is, of course, a multiple-time UFC title challenger, the first man to compete in 4 separate UFC weight classes. He is now the host and analyst of UFC Tonight on Fox, a UFC commentator, co-host of the Anik Florian podcast, a third-degree BJJ black belt who still competes, by the way. He also does one of the best Al Pacino impressions we have ever seen in our lives. He is, of course, the one and only Anik Florian. I know you like that, Kenny. Kenny, welcome to the program. How are you today?
Too funny. My greatest accomplishment is the Pacino impersonation, by the way. Thank you.
Well, Kenny, you've got a lot of accomplishments and gigs and things to your name. Did we miss anything in the intro?
No, I think you got everything. All the important stuff. You got the Pacino thing. That's the most important.
That was the first thing, and then we were like, all right, let's do some research. What else has Kenny done in his life? But in all seriousness, though, with all the things you've got going on, do you find that you're actually busier now than when you were an active fighter?
I am for sure, actually. It's not as grueling on my body, but I definitely am busier than ever. And also, I guess the other thing I would add too, I own a school in Boston that I run with my brother, but I just opened up a school here in Los Angeles. We are going to be open next week. We have like a little soft opening on Saturday in Los Angeles. It's called Meraki Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's a jiu-jitsu school that I'm opening up with my business partner, Jason Hunt, and very proud of it and can't wait to get that open. So, yeah, between getting that gym up and running and all the TV duties and the podcast and everything else, I've been definitely keeping more busy than when I was fighting.
Talk to us a little bit about this new school, because obviously everybody knows the school that you and your brother have. What's sort of going to set this other school apart? What's going to be the focus of this one for everybody listening, for our listeners out there in the US?
For sure. When I look back on how I've changed as an individual, I have to thank Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for humbling me and for getting me to constantly push myself and get uncomfortable with with a variety of things and testing myself. And I think that's when we really grow as human beings. And I think that's when we become humble and become stronger and becomes wiser. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is the reason for that. If I didn't have Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in my life, I don't know where I would be. So I'm extremely thankful for that. And I think that is the real reason of why I changed my life and where I am today. And I feel like that is a way for a lot of people to improve their lives. And I think I'm at the point where I'm just very grateful for that. And I want to share that with as many people as possible. So, we came up with this idea of Meraki. Meraki is a Greek word for putting your love, passion, and soul into your work. And that's something I've always tried to do the best of my ability. And that's what we're going to try to recreate with this new Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school. And that's kind of how much we've been putting into this jiu-jitsu school, with just getting every single detail and putting our heart and soul into it and making it as beautiful as possible and making a real inspiring space and making it a comfortable space for people to go and learn and test themselves and maybe reveal something about themselves that they didn't know that they had, and hopefully reveal how strong they actually are.
And obviously, when you're opening up a school, there's so many different things and facets involved. I'm wondering if there's anything particular that stands out, any I guess tough decisions that you've had to make when I guess choosing how to not only decorate but what kind of equipment to put in and things like that. And also, I'm wondering, Kenny, with your super busy schedule, will you be personally teaching the classes at Meraki?
Yeah, I will definitely be teaching at Meraki. I will. I'll be there as much as possible. If I'm not filming, I will be at the school. So I'm very excited about that. And I think probably the most difficult thing, to be honest, was just making deadlines as far as construction and all that stuff. And Jason really was, my business partner, was great about making sure he was on top of that. But, you can only control so much. Things are going to go wrong and we're going to have to change some things. I think we signed the lease in like April, and here we are in August.
Wow.
Finally getting things ready. So we had a little bit of a roller coaster ride trying to meet deadlines and trying to get contractors that aren't trying to screw us over and all that stuff. So we're finally in the home stretch, and we're grateful to be here at this point.
Yeah, it's exciting times. We want to circle back around to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu because there's a lot of other things going on at the moment. But I just wanted to ask you, Kenny, because you're a super busy guy. There's a lot of stuff going on. And you also pump out, episodes of the Anik Florian podcast every week, which is, a really good podcast and has been a really high-level podcast for a really, really long time now. So tell us a little bit about that. Like, how did you guys get into doing the podcast? And, I suppose me and Casper, we've been doing this podcast for a few years now. We notice it's a huge grind on ourselves, pushing out episode after episode.
Yeah.
So with your busy schedule, how have you guys been able to keep it going for so long?
You know, I think it's just kind of, I think we have a nerd-like passion for the sport. So we kind of, the way we came up with the idea is, you know, after we'd be calling fight for like 6 hours, we'd go back and get something to eat and get something to drink and just kind of continue talking about these fights. And we kind of like have our own little wrap-up shows and talk about what's next and all that stuff. And Anik was always like, man, like we're talking about these fights anyway. We should do a podcast right after the fights, you know, do like a wrap-up show or whatever. And that wasn't so practical because of our traveling schedule and what we needed as far as equipment and whether we'd have good Wi-Fi or not and all that stuff. So ultimately, he was able to convince me to do the podcast on a Monday. We don't always pump them out on a Monday, but we do our best to. And getting them up every week is difficult. You know, John is very busy. I'm very busy. But, yeah, you know, we just love talking about the sport, to be honest, and try to give people just a little bit different perspective. And I think we also feel that I guess there's like a gratifying process to it, because when we're on television, you know, sometimes we don't have a whole lot of time to break down a fight. You know, like the big challenge in television is like you maybe have 15 to 30 seconds to break down a fight, you and your co-host or whatever it is. And pretty soon they're in your ear going, wrap. Okay, let's go to the next segment. And, you know, how do you really break down a fight in 15 to 30 seconds? For me, I like talking about it. So I really like getting down in the nitty gritty. So with the podcast, I think it allows us to really get more in depth and kind of break down fights in a better manner. And so I think it's really gratifying in that regard.
And it is a great podcast. I like that you guys are very sort of real and raw about it, provide a lot of insight. And I also love seeing fighters and former fighters sort of get into the media aspect, because I love sort of seeing the reactions and different perspectives, because obviously you would have done heaps and heaps of interviews throughout your fighting career, and we know that media, it's not always a fighter's favorite part, but now that you're sort of on the other side of the mic with Fox and the podcast itself, does it sort of change the way you view interviews, and do you sort of have a different appreciation for, I guess, what's involved in conducting an interview?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I also appreciate it that much more. I mean, you guys obviously are doing an awesome job, and I could tell because you guys make it very natural. And I think that's one of the most difficult things for television or the podcast is making it just a normal conversation of, you know, 2 or 3 guys or 4 guys at the bar just having a conversation. I think it's more inviting for fans, and even, you know, a lot of the fighters, they don't like answering questions, and it's hard to get them to open up. So if you're able to get a fighter to open up and be more real and show a side of themselves that maybe, you know, they're not so willing to show, I think that makes you a good interviewer. So I think, there's a lot of things that I didn't quite appreciate and still kind of come to appreciate at this point in my career. So it's definitely an interesting twist to the situation, being on the other side of things.
Well, I mean, you've interviewed so many people, so many great personalities in the MMA world over such a long time. Do you have a person or an interview or a moment that stands out to you through your interviewing career that you kind of, I suppose, is up there on the list of the people that you've interviewed in the past?
I guess one of the coolest experiences that, you know, whenever it's said and done, and whatever happens with McGregor and Mayweather, I get to say I called Conor McGregor's first fight, and I got to interview him first in the UFC, and we all remember him saying 60 G's, baby, you know, yelling at Dana, and I got to be there for that. So that was pretty cool. I could always say I called Conor McGregor's first fight, and I did his first interview in the UFC. So that was pretty special.
Well, I mean, you mentioned McGregor, so what a perfect segue. I wanted to ask you, though, what do you think of Dan Hardy getting the call up to do the commentary for the Sky Sports broadcast of Mayweather McGregor? And do you sort of, does it, I guess, warm you seeing that? Do you sort of see it as a bit of a win for the home team, seeing, you know, old Dan get the call?
It really is, man. It's so cool. And I think Dan is a very intelligent guy who has been a student of the game. He really is a true martial artist. He's been doing, you know, martial arts his whole life. And I think the fact that they reached out to someone like Dan Hardy, I think shows how far commentary has come, and especially to have him representing, you know, the guys over in the UK, and to have that mixed martial arts perspective. It's pretty amazing, man. And even just the fact that this fight is getting put together between a top UFC fighter and a top boxer still boggles my mind every single day of how far we've come. And yeah, it's really cool. I'm really happy for Dan, and definitely I see it as a big step forward for the sport.
Now, we know you've gone back and forth on your prediction for the fight. And initially it seemed like you thought McGregor could do it, but maybe not so much now. We're about a week, just over a week away from this thing happening. So tell us, where have you landed on this one? What's the official prediction from Ken Flair right now?
Let's see. All right. Well, I have been going a little bit back and forth. Maybe not back and forth as far as my predictions, but my perceptions of the fight. And it is always confusing, especially hearing a very confident Conor McGregor and kind of, again, realizing that this is a Floyd Mayweather that hasn't fought in a couple years. And again, I keep hearing that maybe he's not training as hard as he used to, and that he's, maybe fighting for the money. Which I'm sure he is. It is a lot of money on the line. And I know that Conor's going out there not to participate. He's not going there to just collect the check. And I think a lot of fighters would when they look at Floyd Mayweather in a sport that they're not involved in. So I think Conor is genuinely going out there to look for a knockout. Can he do it? I just don't know. I don't think so. I don't think there's a guy on the planet, if you are only throwing hands, I don't think there's a guy on the planet who's going to be within 20 pounds, who's going to be able to really outbox someone like Floyd Mayweather. Now, the way that you have to approach someone like Floyd is to make it a fight. You cannot box him. I mean, Canelo Alvarez is a phenomenal boxer, extremely technical. He hits hard. He does everything right. He didn't get close to beating Floyd Mayweather. Mayweather just, looked like he was in a class all by himself. And that was because he took this approach of trying to outbox one of the best boxers, perhaps the best boxer of our generation, a defensive master. And I think you can't box Mayweather. You need to fight Mayweather. You need to make it nasty. You need to make it dirty. And he needs to get it done early. I've said it before. I give Conor about a 10% chance. I would love for Conor to knock out Floyd Mayweather. I think that it would be yet another milestone for our sport. I think it puts us on the map that much more. I think it gives us that much more respect. But it is an extremely, extremely tall task for a Conor McGregor who has never competed in pro boxing to go against one of the best boxers of all time and beat him. Can he knock him out? Yes, absolutely. It is combat. Anything can happen. But I still think Floyd is going to win that fight. And again, I would love for Conor to win, obviously given my background, and I would love to see it happen. I just don't think it's going to happen. However, when I look at other upsets in sports history, a lot of people said Buster Douglas would never beat Mike Tyson ever. A lot of people back in the 1970s said the United States would never beat the Russians in hockey. And, there have been some amazing upsets in sports history. This could be another one of them. But when I look at the stats, when I look at the approaches, when I look at the way that Mayweather fights compared to the way Conor fights, Floyd should win every single time. But this is a Conor that is extremely motivated, and I think he knows that he can't take that traditional boxing approach. I think we're going to see a very unusual approach from Conor. Everything from switching stances to jumping around and finding crazy angles to him getting on the inside and getting pretty dirty when it comes to fighting Floyd.
And we've seen him say that it's kind of likely that maybe he comes back to the UFC and has another fight possibly in December. But let's be honest, Kenny, if he beats Floyd Mayweather, do you expect McGregor to go back to MMA, or do you expect him to have another high-profile fight in boxing, maybe even a rematch with Floyd Mayweather if he is able to get this upset?
So your question was, do I think that Mayweather, will he come back to MMA if he loses or if he wins?
Well, if he loses, okay. I think we think he will be back in MMA. But if he wins, right. I mean, do you see his future sticking around in boxing? Because we all know the huge money that he can make, the big matchups that they could put together. Do you see him coming back to MMA if he does get this upset?
I think I don't know. If I'm Conor McGregor and I get the winner of Floyd Mayweather, I say goodbye to everything. I never step in a ring or a cage ever again. I blow my kisses and I say, thank you. I'm the greatest of all time. You guys take it easy. I have $100 million in my bank. I'm going to go buy an island. But, I think if he loses, I think we'll definitely see him back. If he wins, does he come back to the UFC? I don't know. I don't see. I mean, what else? What's bigger than that? What is bigger than that? He's won 2 belts in the UFC, and then just knocked out or beat the best boxer of all time. I don't think he would come back. I think it would harm his legacy. I think he'd be a fool to come back. He already has all the money in the world, and he just climbed Mount Everest without any experience. So I think he should retire if he wins. But if he loses, I do think he will come back. I think he probably wants to have another fight, maybe against Nate Diaz or maybe a super fight against someone like George St. Pierre for big money. And if he fights, I think a lot of people are going to be looking at him and say, okay, listen, maybe he didn't beat Floyd Mayweather, but let's see what he can do in the octagon. That's his realm. That's where he's at his best. He went out there, maybe he put on a good fight against Floyd, and maybe he goes to the decision, but he loses the decision. I think a lot of people will be interested to see this Conor McGregor now fight in mixed martial arts, and I think he would probably break maybe the $2 million buy or the $2 million pay-per-view buy, purchase for his next fight in the UFC. I think he's going to bring in a lot of fans over from boxing, just based on all the things he's been saying and all the hype up leading up to this fight. On fight week alone, I think he would bring in a lot of mixed martial arts fans, and that's what makes him so special.
It's gonna be it's gonna be a crazy night on August 26th. We can't wait to watch. We appreciate the time you've given us, Kenny, and obviously we want to go back to you because there's quite a few things that we still want to cover with you. I wanted to ask you this: Dominic Cruz and Daniel Cormier obviously share the responsibilities for the pay-per-view broadcast alongside Joe Rogan and Anik. You've obviously been doing the job for a while now as commentator, doing a great job, by the way. Was there ever discussion to bring you on as a third man, and would you ever want to commentate the pay-per-views as well?
Yeah, of course, I would love to. I was doing it for a while. They haven't used me in a long time. I don't know why, but I enjoy doing that. That's always been a real fun part of the work. And if they ever wanted to use me as a third person in the booth, I would be more than happy to do that. It'd be an absolute honor to call the fights with Anik and Rogan or whoever the other third person is.
I mean, there's been a little bit of controversy around the commentating in the UFC. Todd Grisham is someone who, people know very well from his WWE run. He did some great work with ESPN, and he's recently been criticized by the way he commentated the fight. Some people feel like that he doesn't really give the sport and its athletes enough respect. I'm just wondering, Kenny, as a former fighter and obviously a current commentator, what are your thoughts on some of the criticisms that he sort of dealt with his, new run in the UFC?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it is a very tough thing, especially in regards to like getting the names right and all that stuff. And I think that just comes down to, making sure you do your research and all that stuff. It would be really awkward if I was calling a basketball match, a basketball game, and I said, there's LeBron James, as opposed to LeBron James. It would sound really weird, especially to the hardcore fan. And, messing up Kazushi Sakuraba's name or maybe making some remarks that are a little bit disparaging. I think it comes across as a little bit bad. But, listen, we all make mistakes. And I think for Todd, I think he's learning as he goes. This is new to him. I do know that he cares about how good of a job he does. He wants to make sure that he keeps the fans happy, and he's always trying to do his best. And I think it's just kind of a part of the job of learning all the names and kind of satisfying, especially the hardcore fans, right? So I'm sure he'll continue to work hard and keep the fans happy.
Yeah. Todd Grisham's a bit of a work in progress, and we'll see what happens with him. There's of course, another man who, in the commentary booth, and that's of course Snoop Dogg. Recently had some choice words for Daniel Cormier that people didn't really appreciate. Just curious, while we're talking about commentary, where do you stand on that and sort of him being brought in to discuss something that he's not really familiar with? Kind of seems like he's being brought in to, I guess, appeal to certain fans. But what do you think about, I guess, a celebrity being in there and talking about the fights?
Yeah, I have mixed feelings on that one a little bit. I think on one side, I see the appeal, obviously, of someone like Snoop Dogg, who's a big name and also a mixed martial arts fan out there. Bringing in maybe a different twist to the sport. I appreciate that. Again, anything that's going to get us more fans and more views, but there's something that rubs me the wrong way about someone who really criticizes the fighters in a harsh way. I just think that, I don't know, for me, man, we live in this world where, we don't need more people that are out there just spreading negativity and doing it. I don't know. I mean, where do you draw the line between funny and just disrespectful? And I think if you've trained an ounce, if you've trained like 10 minutes in this sport, I think Snoop Dogg would change his tune. If Snoop Dogg did one kind of sparring match against a professional mixed martial arts fighter, or even an amateur mixed martial arts fighter, let him do a camp. Let him do one camp and then let him call the fights. I think that would be a little bit different. I'd like to see how he would call the fights after that. And I'm not saying that in a way that's trying to disrespect Snoop Dogg, but at the same time, like, am I going out there and acting like I'm a professional hip hop guy and acting like, maybe Snoop Dogg's rhymes aren't so high level, or questioning whether he's a gangster or not? You know what I mean? Like, I know nothing about that life. Like, who am I to judge that guy on his hip hop skills or how his freestyle is, or, it just, I don't know. If I know nothing about that, what am I doing talking about it? And if you are going to do it, study it, do your research, find out what it's like to be in there. You know what I mean? And to go out there and kind of disrespect the fighters, I'm not a fan of anyone who does that, to be honest.
Well, Ken, you may not know too much about rap, but you're definitely an OG. Let's talk about the exciting news coming out of New York. I mean, we've been hearing a lot of great stuff about this new Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu promotion called Kasai. I'm sorry if I butchered the name. Please correct me, but I got it. Yes. See, how about that? Todd Grisham, eat your heart out. No, I'm kidding. Let's talk about the promotion. Very exciting stuff. We're hearing great things about it. Talk to us about this thing, because people are really excited about it.
I'm very excited about it as well, man. They brought me on as an ambassador, and hopefully I get an opportunity to commentate for the professional events that they have planned. And myself and Eric Owings and Holly's Gracie and Richard Byrne and Ken Gelman were a part of this organization named Kasai Elite Grappling Championships. And our goal really is to provide entertaining matches that the jiu-jitsu fans want to see. And I think that a lot of the matches that we're hoping to see in jiu-jitsu don't end up as exciting as we hope. And I think there's a lot of jiu-jitsu matches that people want to see out there. And I think also there is a need and there is a market for more professional grappling events, and getting the best grapplers from all over the world, getting the best jiu-jitsu guys to face each other and to make entertaining matches for the fans is something that I think a lot of people want to see in the jiu-jitsu community. And I think it's also a way to raise the level and give these competitors an opportunity to make money and entertain. And I think that's really where we're coming from, is creating that for the fans and for the competitors as well. And yeah, just making it as entertaining and as fun as possible. And, Ken Gelman's a guy who has a lot of experience, from the WWE to Strikeforce, and Richard Byrne, who is, kind of started it and the money guy behind it. And obviously Holly's Gracie with his vast experience in jiu-jitsu and knowing the Brazilian jiu-jitsu community so well. I think we have the opportunity to really bring in a lot of exciting events in the future.
And just to clarify, what exactly will your role be, Ken? Are you commentating? Are you competing? Is it something else? Are you sort of as an ambassador? How will you be involved exactly?
I will be involved primarily as an ambassador and as a commentator for the event. So, that's something that I'm really looking forward to and excited to be a part of.
And just curious, as we let you go, Kenny, I'm just curious, you obviously being originally a Boston guy, I know you're in the West Coast now, but what do you think this will do sort of for the BJJ scene in New York and the East Coast in general, having Kasai around?
I think it's huge. You know, on the West Coast, there's a lot of opportunities for people to compete. There's a lot of different events. But I think for the East Coast, especially with the guys at Henzo's and Marcelo Garcia and the guys in Jersey that are affiliated with Renzo Gracie, I mean, there are just so many amazing competitors that are showing that, listen, the East Coast is on the scene right now, especially in regards to submission wrestling and no-gi competition. You know, Gary Tonin and Gordon Ryan and all the guys from Henzo's, I think, are really showing that they're competing at an extremely high level. Eddie Cummings is another one. So these guys are winning some big-time competitions, and with Abu Dhabi coming around the corner, I think they will prove yet again that they are a force to be reckoned with. So I think it just gives them more of an opportunity to shine, and it gives the East Coast competitors more opportunities to compete against high-level people. And you know, it doesn't mean we won't have West Coast guys involved. They will certainly be involved. But you know, with all the operations out on the East Coast, I think it will definitely give an opportunity for the East Coast grapplers to raise their level, to raise their profile, and to compete in some awesome events.
All right, well, we're super excited. The first amateur tournament is scheduled for October 21st in Midtown Manhattan. Make sure to check it out. And of course, if you are in the LA area, make sure to head down to Kenny's brand new gym opening at Meraki. There is a free event in Los Angeles on Santa Monica Boulevard this Saturday. And also be sure to follow Kenny on Twitter at Kenny Florian. The man does great work, great analysis. And of course, you can see him on all the Fox broadcasts in UFC Tonight. Kenny, it has been an absolute pleasure. We could have chatted with you all day and picked your brain, but we really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for jumping on with us.
You guys rock anytime. Thank you.